Hello, everyone. Until the previous video, we looked at how we can create a simulation. We looked at how we can map real-world traffic counts of passenger vehicles, and as well as how we can add public transport services also to the simulation. Now, at this point, this is kind of a working simulation model. Uh, so now we want to get certain outputs from the simulation so that we can do our analysis based on that, and then maybe do certain presentations based on our findings. Right. So in this video, we are going to look into that. So if you think this content is useful, please consider subscribing to my channel. And now we'll see how we can work with uh, simulation outputs. Right. So now if you go to Sumo's documentation and if you simply type, let's say, outputs, so this will take you to a documentation related to the outputs. Um, so now there are multiple different types of outputs that are there, but out of which I'll be focusing on the emission output. So if you look at the emission outputs, yeah, so it says it can calculate the emission for every simulation time step. Uh, yeah, so now we'll see how we can get this, right? So it says by default in the configuration, if you type emission output, this will get you an emission output. Uh, but this will be kind of for a given time step, let's say. Uh, so each time step you will get a sort of a emission output. Now what I want to do is to, let's say, for this entire corridor, suppose I want to, let's say this is my main corridor in consideration, right? So other roads are basically by roads, but I want to calculate from this location all the way up to here in this entire corridor. Uh, what are the what's the type of, or rather, I want to get an aggregated view or aggregated measure of the emissions that has been made because of this traffic. So I want to go a bit kind of get an aggregated uh, emission output. Now for that, you want something extra to be done in the simulation. So let's say uh, let's go to our um, uh, project directories, and then let's say I want outputs basically, right? So let me say in this case I'll create a folder named outputs, right? And now there are different kind of outputs that could be there. So let's say I create a subdirectory called emissions. Now I also now want to uh, create a file such that that kind of tells Sumo how these emission outputs have to be generated, right? So that is what I'm going to show in this particular video. Now, let's say inside the emissions, I'll create another file. Let's say uh, this, right? Because I'll be later evaluating some scenarios as well. So this, let's keep this as our base scenario. So let me create XML file name emission output generator base, right? So now we have an XML file. Now this is again an additional file that we can generate. I mean, it is an additional file. So let me quickly just show you how this uh, kind of file has to be written, so that you can get the desired output that you want. Now it's an additional file, so you can see the additional tags are here, and obviously you need to give an ID, right? So I gave a corridor aggregated 5 minutes all. So why corridor aggregated? Because I want to get the aggregated emissions for the entire corridor, and I want to do the aggregation for every 5 minutes. And why all? Because I want to get the emissions generated by all the vehicles, right? Each element can be basically customized. Uh, Now, then that's why the ID, it doesn't matter much, but try to be as descriptive as possible. And then whatever the output that is generated will be written into a file called results emission output base. Now, compared to where this file is relative to that, the result, the relative path is given here. So basically, that means I also need inside emissions, right? I want, let's say new folder, let's say emission results, or doesn't matter much, right? So let's say results. So that folder is here, basically, right? So so inside results, I'll be creating this emission output based XML, right? So this is where the your results are written into, and the frequency which the results has to be aggregated is 300, every 300 seconds they has to be aggregated, because I here set the aggregate as true, right? So it's get an aggregated value. And also the the capturing has to start from the 0th simulation second all the way up to 3000 simulation 3600 simulation second. That means we generate 12 emission points, or rather every 5 minutes aggregated emission count is there. Exclude empty here means if there are no traffic in certain edges, ignore them. The aggregate true means I want aggregated results. What is the type of output that I need? I need emissions, and the aggregation has to happen all over these edges, right? This is the main edges in my corridor that I've shown in this here. So all the way from, sorry, all the way from here to here, these are the entire edges. So that's these entire edges that where I want my results to be aggregated are listed here. So if you don't do this for every edge, you get emission output. So that is, in this case, I don't think that's useful. But if it is something that is useful for you, then you also can do so, right? So here you can define multiple outputs as well if you want to write multiple emission outputs, or other different types of outputs, right? So you can get the speed outputs as well. If you ignore emissions, you can get the speed outputs as well. So different kind of outputs can be generated, but to keep this exercise simple, uh, I decided to sticking to the emission outputs only. Now once you create this, again you have to point this, right? Where you point have, so it's an additional file, so it's as an additional file you can point this to uh, this file. So let me take the relative path of it and then just paste it over here. So then you will get the expected output that you need uh, after running the simulation, right? So now you can run the simulation, right, and generate the output. But actually at this point it would be also uh, beneficial for you to run the simulation in the background, right? You don't, I mean, you can run the simulation like this also, right? But now at this point I don't want to visualize it, right? I rather want to generate the output on, right? I don't want to see the vehicles being moved in the network, right? That part we already checked, so we have done a reasonable job to improve the accuracy of the model, right? So I'll close this. Now I want to see how I can run the simulation in here itself. right? As a script itself, I want to run the simulation, right? So now to do that, let's say this is my fourth step. Let's say without the GUI. So I can say I can use the command sumo -c and then point it to the configuration file. It is run simulation.sumo.cfg, and yeah, that's it basically, right? So this has to be passed again into a subprocess command, and oops, then I can also, like, print something after step 4. Something like this, and let's run it and see how it goes. So it goes all the from the very starting step to the ending step where the simulation is run, and upon running the simulation, the outputs will also be generated. Right, so now you see the simulation is being run, right? So whatever the warning messages, errors will be there, uh, but those things you can also check and see whether their improvements are needed. But the idea here is that upon running the simulation, inside this result folder, you should be getting an output. It's, yeah, so you see now an output is generated, right? So now here you see from 0 simulation second to 300 simulation second, you see the like different types of emissions, like carbon monoxide, the absolute amount. This is in milligrams, right? Carbon dioxide, uh, high, and the norm value is basically 4 divided by the number of edges, if I'm not mistaken. You can refer to the documentation and see. So you see, I get 12 different outputs for a given execution of the simulation. I get 12 outputs, right? So you can customize it, how the way which the outputs has to be generated through this file. And then say for example, I want it every 100 seconds. Uh, sorry, right? So if I do this and run the simulation, I'll get 36 outputs will be written into the file, right? So you can play with this and see how the results are generated but that is the idea. So you first define how the outputs are has to be generated, where the output has to be written, and that file will be pointed to the sumo configuration, and upon executing the or running the simulation, you will get these outputs will be generated, right? So this is the generated output. Right, so this is what I have planned for this video. In our next videos, we'll see how we can do multiple runs, right? Because we can't, we need to consider the stochastic aspects as well. Let's see how we can run multiple runs, and then how we can aggregate, or rather how we can use those simulation outputs and let's say visualize them and present our results, right? So we'll continue those in our later videos, and we'll see you on the next videos. Thank you.